Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Every Movie Ever. This is, of course, the program where we are reviewing every movie ever made. And can you believe it, folks? We are coming up on 1,000 movies before too much longer. And so that's there can't be more than 1,000 movies out there. I just can't imagine such a thing. But I suppose we'll find out. And today we're going to find out by starting our reviews with Coraline. This is the, I want to say, first stop-motion feature from Leica, the company that has since made Box Trolls and Kubo and the Two Strings. They're sort of the big them and Aardman Entertainment, who do the Wallace and Gromit type movies, they're the big stop-motion games in town. And Coraline was, I think, their first feature, and it is tremendous. Up until Kubo and the Two Strings, I don't think they had matched it. But this is the story. It's based on a book, a novella, I think, by Neil Gaiman, the spooky, macabre author guy. This is the story of a young girl named Coraline, who isn't satisfied with her parents until she finds a trapdoor that leads to an alternate world where everybody has buttons for eyes. And one thing leads to another that I don't want to spoil too much, and she realizes maybe her parents aren't so bad. This is a tremendous movie. The stop motion is, phenomenal. The story is great. The design, everything in it looks so good. And it's all anchored in this delightfully spooky story that I think is a real solid, kind of kids horror movie. So if you're out there and you're thinking, man, I'd like my children to grow up someday to be a real horror hound, this might be a movie to start them out with. It's a tremendous movie. As a side note, when it came out, this movie you could see it in 3D. I did. I don't typically see 3D movies, but I thought stop motion might look neat in 3D, and this did. This might be the finest looking 3D movie I have ever seen. Of course, home entertainment, you're not really going to be able to match that, but that's fine. It is still an absolutely tremendous movie that even with everything else I've said, also has a solid role for the skinny guy from They Might Be Giants as the dad. He even gets to sing a song. And believe it or not, Terry Hatcher of Lois and Clark fame is really tremendous as the mom. Coraline's a great movie. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars. Speaking of stop motion, Tim Burton has always been dabbling his toes in the waters of stop motion. He produced, of course, Nightmare Before Christmas, the movie that has made Hot Topic into the growing business concern that it is today. He also made that movie, The Corpse Bride, which he actually directed. Now, what Tim Burton directing a stop-motion movie means, I don't know. I don't know if that means he shows up every day. I don't know if that means that he's actually like moving the little things, like one at a time. I feel like he's not. But I am not here to besmirch Tim Burton. Kind of. But what I am here to talk to you about is his, I guess, third stop-motion movie, Frankenweenie. This is a stop-motion affair based on the short film that had, as a younger man, made Tim Burton famous. The story of an even younger man, a schoolboy whose dog is unfortunately killed, and who he then resurrects as a Frankenstein dog. The short film, if you can see it, is delightful. This feature-length stop-motion affair is not. I thought it was pretty boring, to be honest with you, in part because they've had to stretch things out, in part because I wasn't a big fan of the Tim Burton puppet aesthetic in this one, and yeah, in part just because it was overall kind of an unengaging, not particularly interesting story that I also did not feel really took advantage of being a stop-motion film. The original short film is live action, and this felt like it may as well just have been live action too. It just didn't seem like it was taking advantage of the medium that it had chosen. Regardless, it's fine. It's just not anything particularly exciting, which means it's frankly like a lot of Tim Burton's output these days. And that means I'm going to put it at 2.5 stars. So I guess I was on a real stop-motion kick there for a day or two, because I also finally, after years of thinking about it, watched Puppet Master, the movie franchise on which Full Moon Entertainment's fortunes, such as they are, is based. Don't know what Full Moon Entertainment is? This is the company fronted by Charles Band, a sort of horror maestro. He put together Full Moon Entertainment in the 90s, and they made a bunch of direct-to-video horror movies, really taking advantage of the direct-to-video boom of the 90s, supplying your blockbusters, your Hollywood videos with tons of horror movies. I've seen several, but I had never seen any of the entries in their long-running, I want to say it's 7 or 8 movies, Puppet Master franchise, which is about killer puppets. Now, if you're like me, you're familiar with the puppets. There's the puppet with the hook for a hand. There's the puppet with a drill for a head. There's the big, strong puppet. And then there's a sexy lady puppet that, honestly, I didn't know what she did, but I guess it turns out that she throws up leeches. Now, listen, a puppet with a drill for a head, I get that. The little motor inside his head makes the drill go. Hook for a hand, that's fine. But where is she getting the leeches, friends? This is a question that I'm sure will haunt you as it has haunted me. So anyway, this is a story about, it starts in olden times, I don't know, 1800s or something. The guy who made the murdering puppets dies or something, and he hides his murdering puppets in the wall of a hotel. Years later, and completely unrelated, a group of psychics decide to hang out at this hotel. They wake up the puppets somehow, and the puppets kill them one by one. Is the movie any good? No. It is not any good. Like a lot of the Full Moon Entertainment movies, it's slow. The effects are not great. But even so, like I'm here for the puppets. I want to see the puppets. Puppets ain't in it too much. It's mostly about these weird psychics. I want a big thank you to Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. I watched Puppet Master as hosted by Elvira on one of her programs, and that made the whole thing a lot more tolerable. But as is, Puppet Master is not good. I'm going to give it 2 stars. So let's move from killer puppets over to killer dolls. Yes, it's time for us to talk about a Chucky movie. If you've been watching this show, you realize that I've been a late comer to the Chucky franchise, and I really enjoyed the last 2 Chucky movies. So I thought I would go back and watch some more Chucky movies. I started with Bride of Chucky. Now, why would I start with Bride of Chucky instead of the original Child's Play? 2 reasons. 1, Bride of Chucky was available to watch on demand on cable, so, didn't have to spend any money on it. 2, I am a big fan of Jennifer Tilly. Yes, Jennifer Tilly, the high-pitched voiced actress who, I don't know, I think she's charming as heck. I think she's fun and funny. I don't think she gets enough work. I'd like to see her in more stuff. I'd like to see her in more horror movies. She's had cameos in each of the newer Chucky movies. Bride of Chucky is her debut, where we find out that Jennifer Tilly, she plays a character named Tiffany. We find out that Tiffany was Chucky's girlfriend before he got turned into a doll, and now she has finally secured the Chucky doll for her very own. And of course, Chucky and Tiffany have a toxic relationship. One thing leads to another. Tiffany wakes up to find herself in her own doll body. They kill some people together. Amongst those people is Katherine Heigl is in this movie, which is weird. Listen, this is a much more metatextual and comedy sort of movie than the earlier Child's Play movies, which I have seen, just not in a really long time. I had not seen this one. It has a mixed reputation for being a little bit too jokey, and I think that's valid. It's a fun movie, but it feels very 90s-y. It feels very influenced by Scream. Obviously, Brad Dourif continues to shine as Chucky. Tiffany is, I think, a terrific addition to the franchise because Jennifer Tilly is able to bring that, we mentioned Elvira a minute ago, that almost Elvira-esque sense of humor and charisma and macabreness to the whole affair. But overall, it's a weaker Chucky movie, I think. I'm going to have to give it 2.5 stars. Oh, hello. If you've been watching this show, you know that I have watched the Netflix original Oh, Hello on Broadway. I want to say this is the 5th time I've seen it in a matter of only months. It is my latest obsession. I've reviewed it a couple of times here on the show, and I am here to tell you it is as good on viewing number 5 as it is on viewing number 1 on the Netflix. If you are just now tuning into the show, this is a filmed version of the Broadway hit, Oh Hello, which stars Mr. John Mulaney and Nick Kroll as George St. Geegland and Gil Faison, a pair of New York, we'll say gentlemen, who bicker on stage for about an hour and a half. I find it delightful. It is my current obsession. I love everything about it. I'm staying with 5 stars. Had not watched Fanboys in a while. Thought I'd take a look at it again. This is a movie about a group of Star Wars nerds who, upon finding out that one of the nerds has, I don't know, cancer or something, they decide they're going to break into Lucasfilm, into Skywalker Ranch, steal a copy of The Phantom Menace, and watch it before he departs. It's an oddly star-studded affair for an indie comedy. Stars include Kristen Bell, of course, of Veronica Mars and now The Good Place fame. And if you're not watching The Good Place, I do not know how to help you. Dan Fogler is in it, who was, I think, voted most likely to play me in a movie. You also have Jay Baruchel in it. Seth Rogen plays like 3 parts in this movie. Plus, there's a ton of cameos. The whole thing was masterminded by, I can't remember his name right now, but he's the guy behind that show, The Goldbergs. And it's a good movie. It's a movie that when it first came out, I think I loved. And upon most recent viewing, I would have to downgrade it to like. It's good, but you know, it's rough around the edges. It's maybe not as funny as it could be. It's a little too self-indulgent. But it's a good time, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing. 3 stars for Fanboys. If one thing has become clear on today's show, it's that I have the Netflix, and that I watch a number of movies on the Netflix. They also have the original TV shows, and one of the great successes of Netflix TV lately, I think, of the last couple of years, has been the Wet Hot American Summer TV show. The first day of camp and then the second 5 years later season are absolutely hilarious. That meant it was time for me to go back and look again at the movie that spawned it all, Wet Hot American Summer, the film from David Wayne, late of the State, and starring a number of figures from the State, Michael Ian Black, Joe Latrulio, Ken Marino, as well as your David Hyde Pierce, your Molly Shannon, your Bradley Cooper, your Amy Poehler, your Christopher Maloney, and H. John Benjamin as a can of soup. Listen, it's a pretty funny movie. I remember when this came out, I believe I was in college, it was delightful, and it still is. It's the follow-up TV shows work better, I think, than the movie itself, but the movie is still pretty funny, and a great place to see a ton of huge star power before they got super famous. The conceits of the sequels are almost funnier in that the idea of Wet Hot American Summer is it's about a summer camp, and all of the camp counselors are played by dudes in their like 20s. So it's even funnier to watch the first day of camp with all of those characters being played by dudes in their like 40s. Still, it's a pretty funny movie. See it if you haven't. 3 stars. As a child of the 80s and into the 90s, I, like the rest of America's youth, was swept up by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fever. They're heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. There were the toys, of course. We had many of the toys. There were the cartoons. Loved the cartoons. There was a pinball machine I was fond of. An arcade game. And, of course, the Turtles in Time game for Super Nintendo, which still plays in my head every so often when I hear the phrase, "Bury me not on wounded knee." That's for you Ninja Turtle fans out there. And, of course, there were the Ninja Turtle movies that, especially for the time they came out, had some fairly impressive creature effects from, I believe, Henson, and made a ton of money. At a certain point, I believe, that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was the highest grossing independent film of all time, if you can believe such a thing. Now, I sort of aged out of the turtle phenomenon by the time that Turtles 3 came to theaters. So I have never seen Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. I believe my brother has, but I never got around to it, so I finally watched it recently. This is the one where the Turtles, through the use of some sort of, I don't know, magic lantern, travel back in time to feudal Japan and get caught in the middle of a, I don't know, some sort of vague political intrigue between a Japanese warlord and an English dude that wants to sell them guns or something. Listen, I have not watched Turtles or Turtles 2 any time recently. I cannot attest to how they may or may not hold up. All I can tell you is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, which I already had a reputation as the bad one, is not good. And it's also not like bad enough or campy enough to be worth watching. It is not good. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's pretty boring. There's not a lot of good turtle action in it. I cannot really recommend it. What I will recommend, because I think this is insane, is you can watch this movie for free on YouTube, but not the whole movie. Instead, if you find the YouTube channel of the lady who plays April O'Neil, her name escapes me, you can watch all of the scenes that April are in, but not the rest of the movie. I started watching the movie like that, not knowing what was going on, and about a half hour into it, I was like, hey, where are the turtles? This movie is a lot about April and not much about the turtles. And also, it seems like things are missing. Well, that's because it was. So for a, I don't know, avant-garde way to watch the movie, go to YouTube and watch just watch the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 April cut. Otherwise, I can't really recommend it. I'm giving it 2 stars. A recurring theme, of course, on our program is me finally watching movies that I've always wanted to watch, that, you know, the box art attracted me at the video store or something, and that I've just never gotten around to watching. One of those is Dragonslayer, a movie that is purportedly about a dude what slays dragons, starring Peter MacNicol. Yes, Janos Poha from Ghostbusters 2, killing dragons. Sounds like a thing. Here's the thing, it isn't. I did not care for it. I thought it was very boring. It's one of those 80s fantasy movies that came out sort of in the wake of Star Wars, where, you know, Star Wars it's space fantasy, number one. But number two, it's fun. There's a lot of fun and adventure in it. And this is one of those ones that is just super sincere, that is taking itself so seriously, that is taking the idea that Peter MacNicol is a, I don't know, wizard in training or sorcerer in training, takes that so seriously and just isn't a lot of fun. Yeah, there's some good effects work in it, but overall, it's just such a slog of a movie that I'm only giving it 2 stars. So, big Heigl fans at the Houston household, as I think you guys all know. Katherine Heigl, along with your Jennifer Lopez, is an actress whose every movie I will see, because she picks the most bizarre movies for herself to star in, and they are uniformly dumb. And her most recent feature is the unfortunately named Unforgettable, which sounds like a challenge. Seems like you're going into this movie with the movie daring you, like, yeah, see if you can forget this movie. I bet you can. Now, that said, this is one of the better Heigl thriller films, and it may ultimately prove to be somewhat unforgettable with me, because it is pretty hilarious and real dumb. This one is about Rosario Dawson, always a welcome face in a movie, and another actress who does not get enough work. Rosario Dawson has just moved to a new town in California. She is just married, or no, she's going to marry. I don't know. She's engaged, I think, to a dude. And this dude's ex-wife is Katherine Heigl. And Katherine Heigl is insane. And she sets about trying to ruin Rosario Dawson's life by, like, you know, gaslighting her elaborately, by, like, stealing her cell phone. And oh yeah. You see, I'm starting to remember parts of this movie. There are parts of Unforgettable that I had forgotten, but have proven to truly be unforgettable because now they are coming back. You see, Rosario Dawson also has a history with so Rosario Dawson is getting married to a guy who has an evil ex. But Rosario Dawson also has an evil ex who used to, like, beat her and stuff. So Katherine Heigl is both gaslighting Rosario Dawson and using Facebook to gaslight Rosario Dawson's evil ex to try and get the evil ex to show up and murder Rosario Dawson for her. It's bizarre, friends. There's also a little girl involved that is Katherine Heigl and Rosario Dawson's new husband's daughter, so she's a pawn in the middle of it. Heigl is, of course, like super icy and weird and creepy. Listen, this movie doesn't work in any kind of a sense. As a thriller, it is half-baked. The plot is overcomplicated. It never feels particularly scary. No one involved in it, except Dawson, is good enough to make you, like, be afraid. Nor is it quite the camp gem that, like, a whatever happened to Baby Jane is. On its own merits, though, this is very watchable and very entertaining, although not in the ways they hope, but also not as entertaining as you would want it to be the other way. It's still watchable, and I am still going to give it 2.5 stars. A Fish Called Wanda is one of those movies that I guess I would say I have a complicated history with, in as much as I really want to like it. The cast is, of course, incredible. You've got John Cleese, who I believe also wrote it. You've got Michael Palin, so you got 2 pythons in this thing. You have the always terrific Jamie Lee Curtis, and rounding it out, the also always terrific Kevin Kline, in a comedy caper film that on previous viewings I just was never able to fully engage with for one reason or another. The story, such as it is Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Palin, and Kevin Kline are thieves. They've stolen a diamond along with some other guy. This other guy has gotten put in prison and hidden the diamonds. And so they are trying to manipulate each other as well as manipulate John Cleese, who's the prosecuting attorney, into finding out where the diamonds are. There's a lot of backstabbing in this movie and a lot of comedy that, like I said, had never worked for me before, but upon this viewing, it clicked and I loved it. I recognize this movie for the masterpiece that it is at long last. I cannot recommend it highly enough. This is a Fabergé egg of a movie, meticulously crafted in the way that only one of the pythons in Cleese, listen, possibly the best of the pythons, and I would argue that his competition for that is Palin. So you got them both here, firing on all cylinders with a couple of super talented Americans in a script that is just so, precise and pitch perfect. This is a thing of beauty to behold. Amazing, amazing movie. A Fish Called Wanda. 4.5 stars. So that is going to be it for this episode of Every Movie Ever. We've knocked out a few more movies, and we'll be back next time to talk to you about even more. Thanks for watching. Good night.